Hey, this is Alex Head, founder of Subtext Radio.
This is Subtext.
Please go ahead and click the like button and the subscribe button. It really helps us to reach new audiences and promote the artists that we work with. Hit like and hit subscribe.
Welcome back on Subtext Radio. I'm Anabelle, and this piece is going to be about synchronization. It's a little segue from this interview we heard with Lynam magazine, because as we just explained, I'm working on this next issue for Paris, and the theme is the ring road, the boulevard périphérique, and it's been a way for me to continue to explore some of these ideas around acceleration and synchronization. So I'm just going to do a short little audio paper for you, which I will start now. Synchronization, desynchronization, feeling out of sync, dissonant, feeling drowsy, touchy. Time is heavy. Here is a song of 32 metronomes naturally coming into synchronization when placed onto a board propped on cylinders, so that the board can move on the metronome's own rhythm. The metronomes that you just heard came into synchronization in about 2 minutes. There is something incredibly human about these metronomes dancing, attuning to one another, coming to dance on a common rhythm. Synchrony means that by receiving information on others' behavior, we modify our own, like the metronomes attuning to one another. Synchrony leads to the emergence of a self-organized collective and aspects of collective intelligence. One example is the clapping of hands that becomes synchronized in waves of rhythmic applause at the end of a concert. The sound of these metronomes coming into synchronization help us to think about what is commonly known as social synchrony in relation to desynchrony, or how things might get out of phase. Synchronicity, on the other hand, is something different. Feeling some kind of synchronicity is when two things unrelated happen with a specific meaning for someone. It's a coincidence, which for psychologist Carl Jung can explain the existence of the paranormal. It's a sort of message from the universe. Here the metronomes start off polyphonic and slowly become attuned in one rhythm, one tune. Perhaps this sound can help us to think about synchrony in a wider sense, how desynchronization could open up other temporalities, alternative time zones, for ways of being, doing, listening, and relating otherwise. Perhaps in these times of desynchrony can we resist normalcy and creates affective communities. The structures of time of the 24-hour day, 8 hours work, the family lunch, feels as unbreakable as those moving metronomes governed by the laws of physics. Alarm bells, ringtones, schools or church bells are sonic reminders of our routinized rhythms. Time, however, is not just a matter of flow, it is also socially and politically constructed. Social synchrony has attracted a lot of study from biology to psychology. It can be measured by equations and even modeled. Social synchrony is seen as a result of evolution and selection. It is a form of collective organizing that happens spontaneously and is effectively as a group. Through collaboration, social synchrony brings forces to join and collectively organize, which is incredibly productive. In her book Time Binds, Queer Temporalities, Queer Histories, American theorist Elizabeth Freeman deconstructs other forms of social synchrony in developing the notion of queer time. She talks about familial arrhythmia, and arrhythmia is often used to speak about a heart condition, as it is an anomaly in rhythm, like asynchrony. Here, Freeman speaks about arrhythmia to speak about queer bodies and the feeling of unease in the day-to-day experience of heteronormative rhythms, which are generally constructed around family life. The experience of not fitting, she writes, I quote, often feels both like having the wrong body and like living in a different time zone. In the book, she examines queer temporal disorders in art, literature, and cinema. I quote, moments of asynchrony, anachronism, compression, delay, ellipsis, repetitions, and ways of breaking apart what Walter Benjamin calls homogeneous empty time. There is nonetheless something inherently rhythmic about human experience. We wouldn't live without our heartbeats, without the rhythm of our lungs inflating and deflating, the cyclic feeling of days and nights, the ritualized nature of eating and sleeping. Rhythm has been the focus of many anthropologists and thinkers, such as Marcel Mauss, for whom, I quote, we are rhythmic creatures, or John Dewey, who pointed out that our habits is what defines us as a society. At the end of her book, Freeman critiques W.E.B. Du Bois' idea that life is rhythm, a dynamic between the structures of law, rule, and rhythm in a given place, which is an incredible force and the fuel of human agency. Her critique is placed on Du Bois' distinction between different levels of rhythms and a natural base. What can we make of this connection between rhythm and agency? Is there such thing as a natural rhythm? Can we ever experience a form of emancipation from feeling rhythm? What even is rhythm? Is it real, subjective, or totally constructed? In his book titled Naturally Late, Synchronization in Socially Constructed Time, philosopher Will Johncock debunks the idea that some rhythms are more natural than others. For example, what is seen as a life close to environmental rhythms, close to the change of light and seasons, that also follows a form of measurement and a cultural representation of time. He challenges the idea of a natural time in opposition to a socially constructed time driven by the 12-hour clock, as time doesn't exist out of culture, out of representation. Time is squeezed on the pages of this book while I can't sleep, and I have a real deadline. Is there such a thing as time out of time? Time always seems to disappear and never comes back. Many artists have been fascinated by time, its humanness, its fleetiness. Taiwanese artist Teching Tse didn't go to bed for a year in 1970-71 to complete a one-year performance in which he punched a clock card every hour of the day for a year. This time clock piece speaks about the relationship between time and labor and the structuration of the everyday through modernity and Fordist workflows. In 1922, Man Ray made a sculpture called Object to be Destroyed. He used a standard metronome and the cut-up of a photograph of an eye that would move with the metronome and perhaps announce what we could see as a general hypnosis that came with modernity. The artwork was destroyed by visitors who found the work meaningless in an exhibition in Paris in 1956. Man Ray then reproduced this work many times with the new title Undistributable Object, which seems to be speaking of the clock itself. Back to our army of metronomes that we heard at the beginning, that naturally came into synchronization. This to me illustrates a much deeper and critical point, as time is an aesthetic object as much as it is a political one. This is explored by philosopher Bernard Stiegler in his book The Time of Cinema. For Stiegler, modernity is paralleled by mass synchronization of consciousness. This, he says, has happened through the production of temporal and cultural objects, such as the cinema, radio, television, and even the internet. This has to do with our attention being held in time. Synchrony occurs with this media that simultaneously creates a kind of numbing, a loss of individuality that is the impetus of independent thinking and a collective imagination that we might share as a society. Mass synchronization means mass homogeneity. Time is a material of capitalism and a political project, from the extraction of free and enslaved labor to today's labor. I quote, "Rhythm produces political effects," says philosopher of rhythm Bernard Stiegler. Rhythm is what gives the feeling of unity and cohesion of social experience. It's also the political interest in converting individual energies in productive force. Rhythm configures individual energies in making them socially useful and productive, he says, but it is also behind biopolitics of control and cohesion. However, for critic Jonathan Quarry, the 24/7 society that we are in now announces, he says, a time without a time. 24/7 is a static redundancy that disavows the relation to the rhythmic and periodic textures of human life, he says. For Quarry, today's time is deeply non-social, however, because the 24/7 society announces the burning out of human energies through acceleration. There is nowhere to retreat, and certainly no time to retreat. To contrast this idea, let's look at the work of conceptual artist Martin Creed, with his work called Work Number 189, which was realized in 1988. It is composed of metronomes lined up in a gallery space that are each beating at a different speed. So you can imagine that the gallery becomes filled with noise and almost chaos. This work is really desynchronized. It is composed of sound sources that keep their individuality, also making it polyphonic. Desynchrony is then a useful category that goes beyond the metaphor. A state of being out of sync has social, political, and philosophical implications. Living on different time zones is experienced in relation to heterochrononormativity, but also in relation to wider normative rhythms linked to labor and also to the common opposition between day and night times. Can we then think about desynchrony as fostering diversity and agency? Here I turn to sound theorist Carla Maya and her work on rhythm. For Maya, rhythm is not only an experience or a concept, it's also a practice. During the Listening Biennale last July here in Berlin, Maya presented a manifesto on the practice of rhythming. For Maya, a practice of rhythming is a method for sonic thinking and awareness of decision. It allows an understanding of agency not as inherent, but as dynamism of forces. Rhythming reveals agency in material. One of the key points is that rhythming is a multisensorial wordling, a new form of sounding and critical listening. Rhythming is a way of paying attention. Rhythming as a method of world-making is interesting to me in my work as a curator. I see rhythming as intervening, rhythming as a way of shaping poetical material. As such, we can start thinking about not only times, but also spaces of desynchrony, and what a desynchronous practice might be. Here I found inspiration in curator Bonaventure So Benjamin Nigtung in his book titled In a While or Two We Will Find the Tone. He writes, "One must appreciate the possibility of transcending the urge to preach harmony and synchrony to the choir, but also imagine such spaces as cognitive and physical spaces of dissonances and slippages, of disharmony and décalage, of marking time. In desynchrony, we can thus build an alternative temporality for resistance through sound."